Before we get started, I would like to introduce myself and Prior Learning Solutions. As a continuous learner, I feel engaged and empowered learning from the experience and wisdom of my network, as well as sharing my experience gained through over 20 years in sales, marketing, and operations management. The journey of development events is a way for me to continue my own personal development and support others with the development and growth for them. Prior is recognized as a leader in the training industry by Training Industry, Inc. for our success in leadership development. I personally work as a consultant to organizations to improve leadership across all levels of the organization through our customized programs designed specifically to meet their strategic goals with measurable results. Cher Downey,
Yes.
You will be our first panelist.
Okay.
Cher is a senior administrator and an assistant professor with 30 years experience in higher education and leading online learning and technology initiatives for public, private, and profit higher education institutions. Her proficiency lies in creating powerful training and educational programs while being cost effective and cutting edge in technological advancement. She has served as a national presenter, author, media contributor, consultant, and as a mentor for ed tech startups. She holds a PhD and a master's degree with both specializations in instructional design for online learning and a master's degree in legal studies with a focus on intellectual property and copyright. She currently serves as the Vice Chancellor, E-Learning, and Assistant Professor at the University of South Carolina, Palmetto College.
All righty. I'll go ahead and have you move it over to the next slide, please. And I want to thank everyone for attending today. I look forward to hearing from all of you, and I have been remiss and not put my email address up on the slides. I forgot about that, but I will be sure and type it in the chat box later if anyone has questions or as we go through, they find something of interest. So I wanted to talk with all of you. As Nicole said, I've been in higher ed for 30 years, which is really fascinating to me because in my mind, I'm still like 20 years old. So the time has flown quickly, and what I've learned in that 30-year span is I've had a wonderful career, but I've really had to work hard to make sure I've gotten to where I am today. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about what I term the 3 C's. For those of you that are interested in a role in higher education, whether it's for-profit, non-for-profit, even a segment of higher ed, such as a development office or another type of auxiliary unit that works with a university, credentials are huge for us. When you want to rise among the ranks, that is your ticket in the sense of having an understanding of knowledge and expertise. You are looked at differently when you gain those credentials. And so when I started in my career, I quickly realized that I was going to need to earn those and get to where I needed to be. So I invested in myself and obtained a PhD. And a few years, after I was done with my PhD, I was working along and digital technology started really taking off, and I started working in the realm of online learning. And suddenly I was back in a deficit area again because there was a whole world of intellectual property and copyright issues as it responds to being on the internet that I really wasn't knowledgeable about. So I made the decision to go back to school again. It wasn't that I needed another degree. I had 3 of them. But I felt strongly that if I was going to be in charge of a unit or any sort of development, and I needed to provide the level of expertise to the people I was working with, that I needed to have that skill set. So I did go back to school, earn a second master's, and it has paid off over the years in using it in a variety of ways. So I think, the big lesson to learn from the credentials is it's important to be aware of where your career is going, and it's important to know what you'll need to get there and to align that accordingly. The second C is called challenge. And I say that because most of my career has been hired into positions that either have been new to the organization, or they've needed to be updated, or they've needed to be adapted to the current situation that's going on there. And so I've always welcomed those challenges. I like to hit places that have problems or have something messy that needs to be cleaned up and figured out. And so by doing so early in my career, I became someone who is viewed as a project problem solver. And that made me sought after. People could that I brought a skill set to them that I was willing to take on, willing to issues and back up potential, but to give them a scope of what it was that could be done for that particular issue, particular set of people. And that made me very sought after. People started to recognize that that was something maybe that was missing on their current team, or maybe it was something that just needed to be hired in on a consulting level. And so that was a niche I discovered that worked very well for me. There are lots of niches in higher education, and so you just have to be aware and look at where are the pain points in the institution or in the department or the division, and how can you help them out. Now, it does require you to put in some research and some time, because you have to get up to the level of being able to deal with it and understand the best way to do it, and also to know where to identify resources. But it's a skill that can be obtained, and for most any niche in higher ed, the same is true. So, but even if you're in the private sector, you need to look at what is the skill set and what is your niche that you can be bringing to an organization. The last C that I call is for chance. I have always spent a lot of time volunteering, serving on committees at every institution that I've worked with, and also with organizations outside of my day-to-day work. And what I have found is that has been invaluable to me in terms of providing chances. Oftentimes I'll be thought of for a particular project or a particular issue that I may have been overlooked or may not have even been under consideration previously. So I also have to be prepared to take that chance and move forward with it and be able to be successful. So I have to, again, go back to having credentials, doing what I need to find my niche and really identify what makes me a value to someone. But then when the chance comes, taking that risk and going forward with it. Next slide. So as I've worked with women in higher ed over the years, I've always encouraged them to use the 3 C's as a measurement of themselves. They should be looking at where they're at and where they're going and how they're aligning it. But I also always wonder about the women that I don't get to. What about the women who don't have a good mentor or don't have a good boss? Maybe just have never been given the right opportunity. And so for that, I think all of us have a responsibility to encourage, support, and lead by example. I think it's very, very important that we recognize everyone comes from a different background. We can't assume that all women have had the same experience that we have. We can't assume that they've always been supported or been encouraged. Oftentimes they've been in intimidating situations, or they've just been left at a same level that hasn't really had an opportunity for growth and expansion. So when I work with them, I really try to encourage them to just think about what it is that they want to do and where they want to go. And we start to define what it is that they need to do to get there. And then we look at what are resources and how can I help them figure that out. By support, and support lies very hand in hand with lead by example. So I try to lead as I expect them to, which is setting good examples and explaining situations to them and getting them to think about how something works and why I responded the way that I did, why there was a certain answer. And in higher education, we are not a fast-moving, fast-paced group, unlike the private sector. So many times decision-making takes many, many months for us and many, many committees. And so you have to really learn to gauge what's going on at the institution, what's going on at the level of decision-making, and you have to then put all of that information together in order to come up with a response. And coming up with a response also means coming up with something that is positive, that still moves the project forward, but recognizes you may have little control over the overall outcome of it. And so I think it's important to really set that tone and that stage for people so that they understand these are the things that we need to do. Communication is key in higher education, and I want women to understand that to be at the table and to talk among all the C-suite and senior level administrators, you have to be able to communicate with them well, and you have to get them to understand the nature of the solution and the potential alternatives. So I work really hard with the people that report to me and people that I mentor to say, you know, make a decision, identify why you're making the decision. I will support your decision, and we'll talk through it. So I want to give you that level of trust so that you start to feel empowered to move forward and to do those things. One area in particular, though, that I do see in higher ed a lot is women who reach a plateau. They reach a point in their career where they're comfortable, they're, you know, earned a title that they like, and they kind of lose their motivation factor for a while. And then one day, suddenly they look around and realize there's an opportunity available, but they're not sought after for it. And one of the reasons why is they've allowed themselves to get behind in what may be the latest trends or latest knowledge. Maybe they haven't finished credentials. All of those things can impact you. So the easiest example that I think all of you can recognize, regardless of your background, is technology. And so I have seen this time and time again happen where someone has not either learned technology to the level that they should, or they have kind of let it go by the wayside. Now, like it or hate it, it's part of our world in higher ed every single day, even just on the administrative side in all of the systems that we use. And so what you'll see is someone who is middle-aged, who has let their skill set fall behind, and so their worth begins to be diminished. Now, even though we say, you know, there are HR rules and you can't judge someone by their age and you know, be discriminatory, subconsciously we all do that. It's just a fact of nature, and it's a difficult one to work around sometimes. But when you see someone who is middle-aged, who is not keeping up, and you know you have a project that has a hard and fast deadline, and a younger, more trained individual would work better on the team, you're likely going to go with the younger individual. And so that female who has great value and expertise and longevity is skipped over for the wrong reason. And so I try to tell young people that I mentor that, you know, it's a constant lifelong learning to keep things moving. But I also work with people who are in their mid-level career and talk with them about the fact that it's not over and you still need to be doing things, because you're not aware when a chance opportunity will come up and you want to be prepared for it. So I always encourage people, take a look at what you've been doing, take a look at where you're at, you know, and look at how you can move those forward. Slide 4, please. So one of the things that I think is very important is, what are the characteristics that we use to encourage as we promote women and as we support them? So I've put together just a short word list here, because these are things that constantly come up in higher education. We want people that are motivators. We want them to take advantage of opportunities. We want them to be problem solvers. We want them to be an influencer in large teams. We want them to be credentialed and knowledgeable, responsible for what they do, visionary, you know, supported to both what they do and to the people below them and the people above them. We want them to be a strategist and a risk taker all at once, and we want them to lead by example. So those are all really key areas in higher education that we do and that we work with every single day. So, you know, what I encourage people to do is, if they're looking at C-suite roles, the next 10 years are going to be fabulous in higher education, because there's going to be a lot of roles opening up due to the baby boomers retiring. And so it's a real opportunity if you're interested in that, and if you're looking to move up in an institution, the time is coming, but you have to be prepared to do that. You need to build your network. You need to have a group of people who are truthful and honest with you, and they can be LinkedIn connections, they can be from graduate school, they can be internal to your institution or from another institution, but you need to build your network who comes from a higher ed background and understands what it is that you're looking to achieve and how you navigate through those waters. And you want positive people. You want people that are going to support you, that are going to encourage you, and that are going to challenge you to think differently and to look differently at what it is that you want to do, or as I affectionately term it, what you want to be when you grow up. I think we have a lot of women in the ranks right now in higher ed. I think many of them have the opportunity over the next 10 years to move upward, but for many of them, they won't take that chance. That risk is too great for them, or they're not prepared to do so. So I encourage all of you as you move forward to really look at what it is that you want to do in your career and what it is going to take to get you there, and invest in yourself. I'm happy to take any questions at the end of the session today, and I will provide my email if there are things you'd like to discuss outside of the presentation. Thank you. Back to Nicole.
Thank you. Great overview. Next, we have Dr. Terry Christensen, who is the Vice President of Learning and Development for Allegheny Health Network. A native of Western Pennsylvania, Ms. Christensen has spent the last 5 years at the Cleveland Clinic, most recently serving as the Executive Director of Physician Experience and Support. Prior to entering the healthcare field, she worked at Kent State University for 7 years in various administrative and student retention roles. Ms. Christensen received a bachelor's degree at the University of Pittsburgh at Greensburg, an MA at Bowling Green State University, and a PhD in Curriculum and Instruction at Kent State University. With that, Terry, are you ready to take it away?
Yeah, absolutely. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure. You'll notice many of the same themes, and so we may certainly kind of open it up for questions so that the kind of everyone participating has an opportunity to ask any kind of pertinent questions. But, I was really thinking as I was preparing for today, there was a couple kind of reoccurring themes, but one that's kind of, as I look at my own career journey, it's really trying to kind of take a hard look at yourself, and as a woman, try to determine kind of what are my passions. And, what is going to make me get out of bed every day, and what am I going to just absolutely love? I mean, we all spend so much time at work and precious time away from our children and our family and an extended family, that it really has to be a commitment that you just can be all in. And so, I think we all spend a great deal of time kind of soul searching, and it certainly the previous speaker really kind of spoke to that as well. And so how do you come to that fact that, recognizing what your passions are and really thinking about kind of what's next? I mean, one of the recommendations I often, when I coach physicians or other colleagues, is really looking at, what are your top 3 job descriptions that you would absolutely love to be in, and try to kind of extract what are the skills, knowledge, and ability that you need to kind of move into those roles, and try to be as intentional as possible about kind of development opportunities. So when you move forward in whether it's renegotiating a contract at the end of a year, or thinking through how to just even go through your performance review and things that you should be asking your supervisor, it's always good to say, okay, here's what I'm thinking about futuristically, and here's some experiences I need to help me get there, and can we work together to try to make that happen? And so really being thoughtful about what is the next step, what are the things that really excite you, and try to capture the essence of that through experiences. The other thing that I would highly recommend as you're going on that journey, and I think that within every level of your professional career, there's always a role for kind of professional assessments. Not all organizations make the commitment for leaders to take advantage of kind of executive coaching, or certainly kind of a 360 assessment. But that is something that I would recommend that you think about participating in, even if it's just an informal 360 where you're going to trusted colleagues and mentors and asking them about really kind of feedback about your performance, where you can improve, opportunities for kind of growth and those types of things. So, I don't know that you have to spend a tremendous amount of money on assessments, but you can certainly do an informal 360 and get the same level of outcome and help you be really intentional about moving your career forward. Certainly there's free Myers-Briggs, and there's a number of kind of other assessments, whether it's the Hogan assessment, that has a lot of value that, I think is a really important tool and sometimes is overlooked in our professional kind of development journey. The next thing that I would say is really being thoughtful about, just again, reaffirming the earlier theme of being intentional. And so, some of the things that when I look back and, it's so interesting as you look nationally, and, you were always told at one point in my career is like, you need a mentor. And I would agree with that concept, that you do need kind of, a person. And, but I would actually argue with much of the literature that's coming out recently that talks about you really need a talent council. And it's, having no more than 5, but 5 or less individuals that can help you really guide your journey and be thoughtful about your development. And I don't know that they all have to be in the same company. That certainly, coming from my prior organization, you could have 5 people easily throughout the organization that are sitting at various tables that are serving as your advocate, because you're not going to be at every table. And so how can you kind of get very thoughtful feedback from people, but also know that they are helping to kind of shape your career and try to get you ahead in development opportunities and experiences, and are always advocating and in your corner. And so, I think that as I look at professionals and that how they're navigating very highly matrixed environments and kind of coordinating, I think certainly whether it's corporations or universities, being thoughtful about like what is that kind of talent council for you, and who is in your corner to provide you advice to help you maneuver the organization. The other thing that I would say is that I think that, certainly being more in the corporate space at this point in my career, there's this misnomer, I think, that you have to get development in your company, and that, that you should be really focused on going through a high potential program or doing the, company sponsored initiatives. And, while I wholeheartedly, as someone that runs those types of initiatives, support those things, I do think that there's a lot to be said for having experiences outside of the company and making connections. So in my former life, there was a chairman that the company knew that they were going to be doing a national search. There was a clear succession role. There was a woman that had kind of been, part of the department, but hadn't really been actively involved. She had several children, had a very full life outside of her clinical environment, and then had decided, hey, I'm at the point in my life, my kids are in high school, I'd like to take advantage of being a, kind of throwing my name in the ring to be considered for this role. So interestingly, in the backside of the story, she led her local United Way chapter, had done a number of things within her national specialty organization, and just was a really kind of a powerhouse outside of the organization. And I'll never forget, she went in to interview with the panel, and I think that in the back of everybody's mind that it was kind of a clear-cut decision in some regards, because the succession plan was in place. The development process was happening with the individual that had been identified many years before. But I think to the credit of the organization and this particular woman, she walked in and really knocked their socks off, and she hit it out of the park. And she was really able to clearly articulate that she had been a part of many community boards, been part of national organizations, had led strategy, participated in fundraising activities, and was really able to kind of take the mosaic of all of her experiences and bring it together in a really meaningful way for the committee. And it was very powerful. And she was, I have to say, one of the best chairmen I've ever worked with. And so I think that really speaks to that, every experience both personally and professionally, can be a development opportunity for you. So don't discount things outside of your local kind of, whether it's your corporation, your university, because there is a lot out there for you to grow. And I also encourage, particularly with women, that there's always the opportunity for development with your children as well. I mean, there's a lot of family-friendly now organizations that you can hold a board membership or those types of things that I think that so many career women are looking for, because it's like you spend so much time away from your children, you're looking for opportunities to include them as well. And then, one of the last things I would say before we kind of turn it over for questions is really to take risks. And I think that there's, obviously within our careers, we try to mitigate risk in some regards. You want to be able to be very calculated and be thoughtful about what is the next step and how do you do that. But there's an aspect, I mean, if you look at my career trajectory, I loved higher education. I certainly have a passion for the academic environment, but I had the opportunity in my career to help develop an inaugural College of Public Health. And I just really got this, kind of public health bug and said, hey, I would love to work within a health system. And I was able to take the leap into kind of healthcare because I was able to really kind of craft a story for the Cleveland Clinic as to say, okay, here's how all my experiences pertain to the role that I'm applying for. And, and in many ways, the environments, whether it's healthcare or universities, they're all very similar. You may have, kind of where in my case, education kind of plays a different role from a mission standpoint, but there's a lot of fundamental skills, ability, and knowledge that's required for the type of role that I was applying for. And so I think that if anything, I think it's a testament that, can you think out of the box? How can you really create this kind of roadmap for people to say, hey, I have the core skills that I can apply in many different places. And there is, let me demonstrate how I've done this in a different environment and what I can do for you. So I don't think it's ever too late to take a risk. It's just that you have to be calculated and be able to kind of make meaning for others. Because sometimes people just look at resumes and they can't always connect the dots, and you're going to have to work to be able to connect those dots for them. The other thing that I would say is that, throughout your journey, there's always this concept of, kind of if you have a family or aging parents or, we all have kind of personal circumstances. I don't think those have to define you. And there's an element that we all kind of have on roads and off roads. And, and as long as you're kind of truly committed to the development journey, it may not happen in the second that you want it to, or you were thinking that it should because of other circumstances. That doesn't mean that it can't. And I think that, working to really develop the circumstance that best fits you. There's amazing opportunities now, certainly within healthcare. I would argue that probably in higher ed as well, as you look at more of the remote work opportunities. And, there's a lot that's happening to kind of support women in their, in the workforce, and that creates opportunities for you to kind of have the best of both worlds and be able to raise your family or certainly support aging parents or whatever the circumstances. It doesn't mean that you can't advance your career because that you have, a life outside of work. So with that, I guess, I'll turn it over to Nicole to kind of pose questions. But thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and I really look forward to your questions.
Well, I'm going to apologize. Angela Howard had a last-minute thing arise and was not able to, a meeting come up that she could not avoid and had to drop out at the very last minute. If she's able to jump in here and toward the end of the call, she's going to try to still come back in. I appreciate both of you sharing your experience and your insights for our attendees. I do have a question that came in that I'd like to start jumping into some questions. If you have questions, type them into the chat box, the Q&A, and we'll address them as a group. The first question that's come in, I know that more seasoned individuals are encouraged to be mentors to the younger generation. Do you see benefit in reversing the roles, having a younger person mentor a more seasoned individual because they see things from a different viewpoint? Maybe they're more tech savvy, less jaded eyes.
Absolutely. So one of the best things that I've had happen in mentoring people is having just that occur, that reverse feedback that I wasn't anticipating going into it. You know, they had specific questions and things that they wanted supported, and in getting into it, there was a wealth of knowledge I learned from them. And so a good example is with the heightened use of technology in online education, and even in the blended situations that higher ed is using now, finding out from these younger students who are half my age or more than half my age, who talk about, you know, what really interests them, and where they see waste and where they see, you know, time loss, and just seeing the world through their eyes and seeing their concerns helped me navigate better as a result of it. And I think it's an opportunity for you to ask them, you know, what are their concerns? You know, where do they see themselves when they're your age? And what are their fears of ending up in the same pathway or a different pathway? But you really learn a lot in having those discussions. So I always encourage people to mentor. Sometimes it's a very small mentorship. People just need a couple things. Sometimes it's a big one, but definitely open yourself to the experience of taking back the information as well.
And I would agree wholeheartedly. I mean, I think that Shira certainly articulated it well. The only thing that I would add is that, you know, I think that the you know, when you look at the large organizations that are really just knocking out the park, the Facebooks, the Apples, I mean, I think that they capture the essence of, you know, the future is kind of the, you know, the younger generations. And so, I mean, you'd be remiss to not encourage that type of relationship, and leaders that aren't open to that level of feedback and feel like they aren't going to gain much, I don't know how successful they will be long term, because I think that for us to be ahead and to be innovative and certainly move forward, there's an element that, you know, you can't prepare. I mean, you know, the things that students know today as compared to 10 years ago is just phenomenal. I mean, education has evolved so dramatically that how they see the world is really the future. And I think that you see it every day within healthcare of how do we change recruitment so that it's more mission driven, so that people recognize why, that, you know, what is the calling to be in healthcare. And so I think that you're going to see over time, organizations are going to have to be responsive or they're not going to survive.
I think from my experience as well, it kind of addresses the younger generation, but I look at my own circle of mentors, and one of the things that I encourage my friends and others that I've talked with is to find people in different industries and different age groups. Just make it a very diverse. I mean, I have men and women included in my circle, and the viewpoints are different, and it's very important to get those different views to really open yourself up for that continued growth. We have another question come in. This one is from Margie. I currently have a client that is middle-aged woman with high school and college-age children who have been struggling with a lack of growth at her present job and strained relationship with her new manager. What would you recommend to help her continue to grow in her career while continuing to work in this difficult work environment?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's probably more average than unique. You know, I think there's an initial question of is her intent to stay there? Because that's one pathway. And if she's thinking, you know, I just need to move on to a different company or a different job or a different role, that's kind of a little bit of another pathway. But bottom line, you know, it's looking at the current situation and why is that situation evolved. I mean, we all know that there are people out there that are not good managers, and we recognize that. But is the disdain of management because she is not keeping up with where she needs to be? Are they frustrated with her work performance? You know, I would seriously encourage her to pull her evaluations and see what kind of comments have been made on it. I would certainly look at where her skill set is, and are there opportunities for growth and movement in that. And depending upon the type of organization that she's in, that could be internal resources. It may be that she needs to go to external resources. But then she also just needs to decide, is she staying for the sake of having a job, or is she staying because she really likes the company and is hopeful to move out from within that current management situation? Because if she's staying for the sake of having a job, that's going to start to show in her performance as well. It's going to become, I'm just showing up because I need the check, and that just adds to the situation. So I would really encourage doing a little bit of self-evaluation and a little bit of analysis in terms of where she's at this point in her career and where she intends to go, and seeing what she's missing.
The other thing that I would add is I think it's, this is really where you leverage that talent council and do some type of kind of informal 360 to say, okay, is there something that I'm not seeing? I love the aspect of kind of that self-reflection, looking at your evaluations. But I think that, even kind of some local, advice to get a sense of, is this an organization that, for whatever reason, I'm not, something's happening here beyond me, or is it this manager? Like, how can I try to repair this relationship? Because at the very least, if she assesses that she would like to move to another organization, she's going to want to be in good standing. And so the question is, how do you pivot and make yourself valuable and really be in the driver's seat as to what you want to do next?
Very good point. We have an anonymous question come in. Other than the ultimate glass ceiling for our country, do you still see areas of industry or types of jobs that women are still hitting against and not breaking through? Any thoughts on reasons why, or what else needs to happen for this to become a non-issue?
I can jump in on that. I honestly, I'm not sure if it's industry specific, to be honest. I think that every industry is struggling with this. As someone that works on physician succession planning, I've been at 2 organizations that are absolutely committed to making sure that women are an equal player. It's one of those things that they have to be intentional. They have to be thinking about it every day. And we're working very hard to make sure that happened. As you look at the national phenomenon of not enough women having board seats, I think that there's this, and despite the, all of the press and all of the efforts to get women to have, kind of more board representation, it's still not where I think anyone would want it to and where we'd want to be as a nation. So, I do think that there's a lot of opportunities there. I think in some ways we're not good advocates. I think that there's a number of TED Talks that really speak to that, and this is a broad generalization, but we fix things. And, and we're not necessarily self-promoting, we're getting it done. And where some of our male counterparts may or may not be, are better at kind of that self-promotion, being at the table. And there's more of an emphasis on those types of things. And I think self-promotion is a fine line. They say that you need to do it from a branding perspective, but it also can have, you can have a fallout from it as well. So I think that there's, I think that all industries are still grappling with this. I don't know. There was just a article in particular in higher ed that was, discussing this issue in the Chronicle of Higher Education. It wasn't specifically, it referenced women, but there was other populations as well. I think that the element of, what needs to happen, I think that there needs to be an acknowledgement, on behalf of organizations. It needs to be kind of top of mind to move forward and make sure that they're, thinking through how to, make this a kind of a top priority. But then I also think that women need to be prepared to be promoting themselves and kind of putting themselves out there. And, you may not always be successful, but it goes into that kind of risk-taking endeavors just so that, when the right situation happens, that you're available. Because I think that there's a lot of times where women aren't at the table, and for whatever reason, and sometimes we may be at fault. And oftentimes we're not, but I think that there is that fine balance.
Yeah, I think Terry is spot on with that. And, the only thing that I can add is we do sometimes set ourselves up. And the reason I say that is I have seen people women who have had very full lives and manage and balance and move up in their career and have broken through the glass ceiling as if there wasn't even one. I've seen other women who have taken the same exact path but haven't been as successful. And in those times, sometimes what you see is, and I think of a good example from last year, we had someone who is very, very, very devoted to her children, and that is just wonderful. But she also wanted a very full career. And so the catalyst became meetings always had to be moved around so that she could attend because she needed to leave early to go to soccer or whatever the case may be. We all do that. We all have some time where we need to get out early or we need to come in late or something, and everyone's pretty accommodating. But when you do it over and over and over again, it starts to be a little irritating both to the people that are putting the meetings together, and it shows the people who don't have that flexibility, who are in the same situation, that you're getting some sort of favor because you're the one that's always vocalizing about your children and what they do and such. So fast forward, and an opportunity came up and somebody suggested, what about this person? And the first comment that came out at the table was, she's so devoted to her kids. I just don't think she will put the devotion into this role. Now, I disagree. I think she would have put the devotion into that role, but she never got the opportunity for them to think about that, because immediately everyone went, oh yeah, she always asked for that. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I think her priorities are where her priorities need to be. But that being said, she made it such a blatant priority that it impacted how people see her. And so they don't see her as this very phenomenal, person who could really step in and do the job. They see her as the mom that also works here. And that's where she kind of overstepped that, and didn't really keep those lines clear for people, and it cost her an opportunity as a result of it. I do see in higher ed, in bigger institutions, the large institutions, women are making strides and moving up quickly. In some of the smaller institutions or private institutions, it's a little more difficult. But I think more than anything, the glass ceiling is going to change over the next 10 to 15 years, because the people that are coming up now in the ranks, the younger generation, are looking at different things. They're looking at work-life balance. They're looking at, how they can be flexible and have an opportunity. And so they're going to start to change and morph how that glass ceiling works. But in the interim, we have people who have always had it in the old structure, and they're struggling to give a successor. I see it in higher ed all the time. I have worked with a couple of schools who have asked, for help in trying to build a succession plan, and have brought me in solely for the reason that they couldn't get to it, even though they knew the answer. They couldn't get to it with everyone around the table knowing each other. And so it becomes a very hard issue. I personally try not to think that there's a ceiling. I just kind of move forward and do what I need to do and look for opportunity, and I push forward. But that's my personality, and I'm able to do that. And so I recommend for people that don't have that ability, then they need to do it another way. And that's where they need to make themselves available. They need to make themselves known, and they need to do a little bit of self-bragging and self-branding in terms of what they bring as value to the table. But it's a good question, and it's a difficult one that we're going to have to work through over the next few years.
I have a question for you. I think it goes along that line when you talk about self-promotion. that's something that I've struggled with through the years. Like, how do you do that with a balance? Well, how would you recommend people take a look at that and how to take advantage of opportunities and know when those opportunities, when the right time is to take advantage of them?
Well, you know, self-promotion can be a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But I think back to, and Terry alluded to the Chronicle article, and there was also a similar article a while back in the Washington Post. And what it talked about is when a man walks into a board meeting, he will say, I finished Project X. I led the team of 20 people, and here's what we did, and here's the outcome. And everyone thinks it's wonderful. A woman will come in and say, thanks to my team, we were able to get Project X done, and we came in on time. They all did such a great job, and they were very valuable. That's a form of self-promotion right there. He walked in and basically set the tone that without me, that project wouldn't have been done. She walked in and said, I'm a nice person, and because all these other nice people worked with me, the project got done. And so that alone is one type of self-promotion and self-branding, which is being able to acknowledge what you do and taking credit for it. And so women are horrible at this. Everyone is. We all struggle with it at various levels. To be able to say, hey, here's the reason this happened, and you do it in a professional manner. You know, you don't come in and just really throw down the gauntlet and say, it was me or nothing. But you do come in and say, hey, here are the projects that I've led. Here is the success we've had, the return on investment. Here are the outcomes. And you start to do that. When you work in an organization, all organizations have internal communications, external communications, and you'll see 9 times out of 10, it's all male names in there that say, hey, this person went to a conference, this person, you know, presented this person landed this contract. Because those people take the time to put that information in there, and oftentimes women won't do that. It's a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week job to have yourself out there, to make sure your LinkedIn is updated, to make sure that you're networking out with people, that you're getting the information across that this is who you are and this is what you do. It's not easy, but it's one of the best investments that you can make in yourself. And we don't do it enough, and we aren't strong enough about it. We are soft touch when we come out and say we do something, and women need to be much, much stronger about that. So it's something that everyone needs to work on, even if it's something small. Start small and keep working at it, and keep making sure that you just align yourself with when it's appropriate, saying this is what I've done or this is what I've led, and showing the value in it.
Yeah, I think that it was so well articulated. I had a gentleman probably about a month ago say something to me that's been, it was really profound, because you always hear this, like, it's about who you know. We've all heard that statement at least 55 times, in any given year. It's who you know. That's why you get on that committee. It's who that person knew to do X, Y, Z. And this gentleman was talking about in relation to kind of careers, and we were just having this open conversation. And he's like, that's the old adage in my mind. It's so untrue, in that it's not who you know, it's who knows you. And in the last month or so, I've been really grappling with that, because I think it's so very true. And when there's been a number of examples even throughout this conversation of kind of, you've had an experience with somebody, they call and say, hey, you have this niche, or you have this expertise, I'd like you to work on X. And so I think that it's really, you have to, in my mind, in some ways, the internal gauge is, what is enough kind of self-promotion that people will know you, 2 years from now, 1 year from now, what is your legacy? What will they know about you? Because I think that is really kind of an interesting litmus test, because it is, at the end of the day, it's those connections and those relationships and what people know about you that helps you kind of move forward. So it's just an interesting way to think about it.
I love that. That is fabulous.
Yeah. it stopped me in my tracks. I was like, wow, yeah, I never really thought about it that way. But when I think about like those kind of moments in my career and really, you know, kind of game changers, it wasn't because of people I knew. It was people that knew me because of other things or other experiences of me. That really made those things happen and made those a reality. So I did think it was a really interesting and profound way to think about it. And it changes your lens of how, you know, how to kind of go about your career.
I love it too. I think that one of the other things that I've run into and experienced is that it's being yourself and making yourself vulnerable. I think that a lot of times women find it hard to open themselves up so that people do get to know them in that work environment. Do you feel like that has a play in it from experience?
I think, you know, I mean, I think that you have to be vulnerable to take risks. I mean, I think that there's a lot of components that vulnerability definitely plays a role in your career, absolutely. And I don't know that it's something that, yeah, I mean, obviously, I would agree with you wholeheartedly. Women aren't as good about being vulnerable. And, you know, I think that that's something that we probably all struggle with, of how vulnerable is too vulnerable.
Finding the right balance, for sure.
And I think the other piece of it is, you know, women struggle many times, not all women, but a lot of women struggle with the difference between being professional and personal. And I always call it the gray line. So, you know, when someone says to you they weren't happy with the project you did, you take that personally. That person doesn't like me. That person, you know, is out to get me. That person is out to, you know, ruin my career. And so you hear women say this. You know, if you tell a man, don't really like the way you did this project, like you'd redo it, they go, okay, and they move on. And so I see women who are successful who have understood and recognized where to split that apart. It doesn't mean it doesn't hurt when someone says something to them, but they've learned to compartmentalize it and say, this is me professionally. And so I'm going to go in there and do the best job that I can and have great discussions and understand that there's going to be some negative feedback, but I'm not going to take that as it's against me. It's about the work I did and I need to do it differently. And so I think for women, they have to learn to balance that and not make everything about them. And that's hard for us. It really, really is. I personally, I like to work with men versus women many times because there's not as much of an emotional sector that I have to deal with. I can get things done, and I'm a very get things done person, and I don't take it personally if you say to me, boy, I'm really not happy with this, or I really wish you'd done that. I just kind of move on with it. So I've learned over the years to compartmentalize these two pieces of my life, and so therefore it's easier for me to work with men because they're more similar to that than some women who are more emotional about it. And I'm not saying women shouldn't be emotional. It's one of our greatest gifts because we definitely bring a lot to the table. But I think when you let it override having a professional view of things, that makes it very difficult. And then it makes others uncomfortable and concerned about working with you in the future. All of that impacts your brand, and all of that impacts how you move forward and what you get done. So, you know, there's things to think about and to look through as you look through your self-awareness that can help your career as well.
Well, we had a few comments come through. Thank you, Terry, for that great statement. And thank you both from Margie for answering her question. Are there any last things that you'd like to close up with before we finalize the program today?
I think that, it's amazing because you read all of these articles and you particularly like, whether it's, the Sheryl Sandberg or others, you read just the amazing accomplishments women have, but then, at the same time losing her husband and watching the strength that she got from such an amazing and just devastating time. And so I think that we deep down all have the capacity to just do amazing things. And it's really trying to find the strength and resiliency to recognize that Rome wasn't built in a day. And, you need to, each one of us within our own self have to really figure out kind of what are the steps, kind of to take forward that we feel comfortable, whether it's balancing kind of personal things and professional things. But I think in this day and age, it's all about further, faster. I need to get this experience. I need to get this build. I need to do X, Y, Z. And, sometimes I think that we learn so much more by just taking a step back, and we go further, faster by being self-reflective and intentional. And this day and age sometimes underscores that. So I would just ask, just by participating today is a testament to being open to that, but certainly continuing that practice, because I don't know that it's quantifiable of how powerful it can be in helping kind of chart your course. And it's been a distinct pleasure to be with everyone, and certainly I'd be happy to kind of entertain any questions or any emails, that anything that I can do to help anybody, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, I would agree. I think anything that if you glean nothing else from our talk today, then taking a step back and looking at yourself, or if you're working with someone and helping them, to just really analyze where they're at, where they want to go, and what's missing in there. I think a lot of these pieces we've talked about today will fall into place, but you can't tell where they're at until you have everything aligned. So I thank everyone who came today, and I will type my email address in. If anyone has further questions, feel free to reach out to me.
Well, thank you to Cher and Terry. Thank you very much for sharing your perspectives, and to all the attendees that have participated today. I would like to also to save the date. We're going to be talking about empowering employees to learn on August 2nd. So if you like the journey of development, please let me know any feedback to improve our program or topics that you might be interested in. And if you're interested in being a panelist in the future, go ahead and reach out to me. And I thank you again for taking the time to participate today. I hope you enjoy a great day and a great journey on your development.